I'm John Little, and this is the ShockCast.
Altitude, velocity, light. 8.5 down, 220 feet. 15 forward. 11 forward, coming down nicely.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
Iran's nuclear weapons program must be stopped. There can be no question about this, and neutralizing Iran's nuclear capability will lead to war. Unfortunately, the mountains of Iran make an invasion impossible. In fact, Iran has never been conquered except when she was weak, and right now, she is not weak. Hopefully, the U.S. military understands this, and the question is, what will Donald Trump and America's allies do? No one can be completely sure, but you can bet that some attempt will be made to fight a limited conflict. However, it's doubtful that this conflict will stay limited, and the resulting cataclysm will be straight out of prophecy. Only a fool wants war. And the only reason why you would desire to fight one is if the alternative was worse. Britain and France had an entirely reasonable aversion to fighting a war with Nazi Germany, but they did not understand the alternative. So they practiced appeasement, even while Hitler invaded Austria and Czechoslovakia. Then he invaded Poland, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and then France. By the time that the fools in charge of Britain and France understood the real alternative to war, millions were dead and dying, and the jackboot of tyranny was firmly on the neck of the survivors. Britain and France knew what Hitler intended to do, but they thought that he was like they were and could be reasoned with. From our perspective, it is easy to see how wrong the world was to placate Hitler. Instead of appeasement, he and his henchmen should have been assassinated. But if you were living during that time, you might not have been so sure. Well, we are yet again living in another moment in time where we face an enemy which is seeking the means to drown the world in blood. And for those who have not seen my proof of the truth of that, let me point you to my previous articles and videos on the topic, and you'll see the links below for those of you watching via YouTube. If you can get through all of that and not see the need to eliminate Iran's nuclear program, you are a fool. The same kind of fool as Neville Chamberlain, who sought to appease Hitler. Now is not the time to be fools, but the stupid and foolish will always try to have their say, as I have been witnessing recently. So what will the wise try to do about this attempt by Iran to become a nuclear power? Unfortunately, they don't seem to be very many wise people around to ask this question to. Much of Europe seems intent on doing precisely nothing. And America is, well, I'm not sure what America is doing. It seems that too many people are intent on repeating the mistakes of 81 years ago. What happened 81 years ago? The Munich Agreement that gave Hitler the right to dismember Czechoslovakia. It was just like the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, that gave Iran the right to keep machinery for producing nuclear weapons as long as the Iranians promised to wait before making any nukes. And the Neville Chamberlain morons of the West gave Iran billions upon billions of dollars that have enabled them to arm Hezbollah and Hamas, solidify Iran's grasp of Iraq and Syria, and build a bigger and stronger military. But don't take my word for it. Listen to Dennis Prager tell it better than I ever could.
We are reliving 1938, the year that democratic Western nations assured a police state, the Nazi regime, that they would do nothing to prevent its expansion. That year, the British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, went to Munich to negotiate with Adolf Hitler. He left believing Hitler's promises of peace in exchange for Germany being allowed to annex large parts of Czechoslovakia. Upon returning to England, Chamberlain announced, "Peace for our time." The 2015 agreement between America, Europe, Russia, China, and Iran mirrors 1938. The Nazi regime was a police state. The Islamic Republic of Iran is a police state. The Nazis' greatest aim was to exterminate the Jews of Europe. Iran's greatest aim is to exterminate the Jewish state. The West dismissed Hitler as the Jews' problem. The West dismisses Iran as Israel's problem. Nazi Germany hated the West and its freedoms. The Islamic Republic of Iran hates the West and its freedoms. Germany sought to dominate Europe. Iran seeks to dominate the Middle East and the Muslim world. And just as Britain and France appeased Nazi Germany, the same two countries, along with the United States, have chosen to appease Iran.
That video was called The Iran Nuclear Deal, and you should watch all of it. Watch the whole thing. This video from 4 years ago is only 5.5 minutes long, and it lays out the parallels between Iran and Nazi Germany, better than any other video that I've seen. And for those watching via YouTube, the link will be below at the end of this video. This malign insanity of Barack Obama and Europe has laid the foundations for a horrendous war that the West cannot win. Why would the West be unable to win a war with Iran? Mountains. Lots and lots of mountains. And that strong military paid for by the billions given to Iran by Obama and the world. In terms of her ability to defend herself, Iran is the Switzerland of the Middle East. High mountains lie along the borders of Iran, making it impossible for any army to conquer Iran as long as she has sufficient personnel and weaponry to man her defenses. And Iran does have sufficient manpower and weapons to defend against invasion while projecting power into the rest of the Middle East, courtesy of the JCPOA. One more thing that we have to thank Barack Obama for. The other reason why the United States and her allies cannot win a war with Iran is because of how modern armies fight. They depend on aerial superiority, mechanized infantry, fast tanks, and flat terrain to win wars. This was the strategy for confronting the Soviet Union. It was the strategy for the First and Second Wars with Iraq. This strategy was a complete failure in Vietnam. The U.S. will suffer a similar failure should she use this strategy when confronting Iran. Iran is easily defended with mountainous terrain that will spell defeat for any sizable invasion of Iran. The average Iranian would defend every nook and cranny along the treacherous mountain passes. Whatever misgivings Iranians may have towards their own government will be forgotten in the face of the common enemy. And the countryside of Iran is where the mullahs have their greatest support. And the morons running the U.S. military do not understand this. When America's armed forces staged the largest military exercise in history called Millennium Challenge 2002, they were simulating the invasion of Iran, and they demonstrated why the U.S. is doomed to lose a ground war against Iran. The following video shows it best, and it focuses on the general picked to be the Op 4 commander of the Iranian side of this simulation. That man was retired Marine Lieutenant General Paul Van Riper, and he used Iranian tactics to decisively defeat American forces in just 10 minutes. Here's the video that described what he did.
As soon as the U.S. Navy was beyond the point of no return, he hit him, and he hit him hard. Missiles from land-based units, civilian boats, and low-flying planes tore through the fleet as explosives-laden speedboats decimated the Navy using suicide tactics. His signal to initiate the attack was a coded message sent from the minarets of mosques at the call to prayer. In under 10 minutes, the whole thing was over, and Lieutenant General Paul Van Riper was victorious. So, how did 19 ships and some 20,000 U.S. troops end up at the bottom of the Persian Gulf?
It's titled, A Marine General Led a Fictional Iran Against U.S. Military and Won. Watch the whole video, it's a good one. Unfortunately, this video proves that America's military doesn't learn and is doomed to be defeated in any ground war with Iran. Like I said, morons. But back to why Iran is such a tough nut to crack. The Iran-Iraq War of 1980 to 1988 is an example of why Iran is so hard to defeat, even though the Iranian military before that war had been decimated by purges and was poorly led, even though Iran's military was demoralized and lacked vital spare parts, even though there seemed to be no way that Iraq could lose a war with Iran, Iran still won. Iraq thought that it could capture the Iranian side of the Shatt al-Arab and grab all the flat area up to the foothills of the Zagros Mountains. Saddam Hussein failed, and failed badly. Not only did he fail to gain any additional land area, but he spent billions on the war, slaughtered hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians, and earned the eternal enmity of the Iranian regime. Saddam was a fool, and proved it by also invading Kuwait in 1990. What a moron. Only Alexander the Great, the Rashidun Caliphate, and the Mongols ever successfully invaded the heartland of Persia. And they only did so when Persia, Iran, was weak and divided. Alexander was able to defeat the Persians by using superior strategy and technology in Turkey and Mesopotamia, before moving across the Zagros Mountains. The Rashidun Caliphate faced a Persia weakened by wars with the Byzantine Empire, and the Mongols faced a divided and weak Khwarezmian Empire. Basically, the Persians, Iran, were only defeated when they were in decline and had defeated themselves. And right now, they aren't. Not even a little, as Saddam Hussein found out to his cost. And it would probably be wise to leave them alone, but we can't. They want nukes, and that would be a horrifyingly bad idea for the West. So if a land invasion of Iran is out, what option, or should I say, what good option does the West have? The best that America and her allies can do, if they are wise, is a limited strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, followed by years of brutal conflict along the shores of the Persian Gulf. Destroying Iran's nuclear infrastructure would require the destruction of all air defenses around these nuclear targets, followed by an aerial bombardment of the nuclear targets themselves. Then the U.S. and her allies would need to seize all nuclear facilities that survived the bombardment using airborne infantry to infiltrate the area and ensure the destruction of all nuclear centrifuges that remained operational. Once the operation was over, we would all need to sit back and hope that we would survive the wave after wave of assaults from the Iranian military and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. The Persian Gulf would become one vast oil slick as tanker after tanker is sunk by Iranian missiles, rockets, and gunboats. The U.S. would need to blast anything and everything that moved along the entire shoreline of Iran, and they would need to do that for years. The U.S. Fifth Fleet in the Persian Gulf would need to shoot down everything in the air and destroy all boat docks and missile launching sites along the Iranian coast. All Iranian boats of any kind, military or civilian, would need to be sunk. Special forces units would need to constantly operate up and down the Iranian coast searching for ammunition dumps, rocket launchers, and guided missile depots. In the meantime, Iran would unleash Hezbollah, who would try to launch up to 150,000 rockets and missiles into northern Israel. Israel would try to destroy launch sites before those rockets and missiles were fired, but Israel will probably be less than successful. Israel will be badly, badly damaged in the barrage. For Israel to survive these waves of missiles, the Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, would need to have good intelligence describing exactly where Hezbollah missile and rocket launchers were positioned so that they could be destroyed. Israel might even need to invade southern Lebanon and southwestern Syria to destroy any Hezbollah and IRGC units operating within range of Israel. If everything worked perfectly, the United States, Israel, and any allies involved might survive with only a few singed feathers. Those of you looking for a more visual and somewhat more optimistic analysis, the following video is pretty good.
US bombers hit conventional Iranian targets and destroy much of the country's nuclear infrastructure in Natanz, Esfahan, Arak, Fordow, etc. Still, Washington stops short of an all-out war. On the other side of the fence, however, the Iranians believe they are at full-out war and launch a powerful counterattack. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed off with hundreds of naval mines, while small Iranian kamikaze boats, drones, and a fleet of mini-subs deter and harass the American fleet in the Persian Gulf. As a countermeasure, the United States uses surface vessels for surveillance and reconnaissance to detect or eliminate the Iranian attacks. Nevertheless, some attacks and losses cannot be avoided. Likewise, the price of oil skyrockets to $150 per barrel and stagnates GDP growth worldwide. Having crossed the point of no return, Tehran launches as many missiles as it can at US military bases in the area over the next few days. At the same time, Iranian proxy militias target US troops in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, while the proxy groups in Yemen launch a barrage of rockets against Saudi Arabia and overflow parts of the Red Sea with naval mines, and thereby damages the trade passing through the Suez Canal. The global economy takes another beating. At some point, Israel gets drawn into the conflict and clashes with Hezbollah. Iran decides to raise the stakes for the United States by hitting Israel. As such, Tehran directs Hezbollah to attack Israel using its arsenal of some 130,000 rockets. The assault overwhelms Israel's Iron Dome missile system, leaving the Israelis with little choice but to invade southern Lebanon and even parts of Syria in order to eradicate Hezbollah's local strongholds. What began as a tit for tat now affects much of the Middle East.
It's titled, What a War with Iran Could Look Like. Shirvan, the one doing the research, analysis, and narration for this video, makes one error in his calculations, and it is a significant one, as I've illustrated before. He does not include Twelver Shi'ism and their fanatic desire to wash the world in blood to bring back the 12th Imam, the Imam Mahdi. That is why I believe that the above analysis, while good, is somewhat optimistic. But even his analysis spells doom for America and the global system as it stands now. This war will collapse the global financial system, paralyze vast swaths of global trade, destroy energy delivery systems, and catastrophically deplete America's ability to project power around the world. The current system as we know it will burn to the ground and will need to be rebuilt from its ashes. And that's assuming Iran doesn't launch an EMP strike upon the United States. If God were on America's side, then maybe we could expect a better outcome, but God is not on America's side, and hasn't been for quite some time. So America should expect the very worst result. For those of you who are Christian, and I hope that all of you are, there is a silver lining to all of this, and you can find it in the fulfillment of prophecy, which is the core reason of why I am talking about all this. This coming war will set the stage for the fulfillment of the prophecies found in Isaiah 17, Isaiah 30, Ezekiel 36, 37, 38, and 39, Zechariah 12 and 13, and the other passages in the Bible that speak of Ezekiel's fire, and the events that will lay the groundwork for the final end of these last days. Yes, the Great Tribulation is coming, and these events will help lay the path for its coming. But there is much that must happen before we see it arrive. This is barely even the beginning of those precursor events, and it's what I want to talk about next, Lord willing. Hey, you like that video, right? Great. Click like and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified. Then go to the next level. Subscribe to the Shock Letter at theshockletter.com and follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Now, read my book, Ezekiel's Fire, at ezekielsfire.com. Why? Because Ezekiel's fire is coming.